Yes, folks, that actually happened. On the left, you saw a 2017 video of Trump pushing aside a world leader to hog the spotlight at the NATO summit. And on the right, you saw a video clip from the G7 where you have the French Premier, Emmanuel Macron, essentially being very chummy with President Biden. Welcome to this episode of Ignition Time, everyone. My name is Dr. Nitin Choda, and my goal is to bring you the latest news pertaining to the country, the economy, as well as our money. You'll see this headline on your screen from the Financial Times. World leaders back President Biden's G7 call for more economic stimulus. In fact, this summit of major democracies rejects any stinginess, if you will, any post-COVID austerity, and welcomes the US appeal for more stimulus to meet the moment. I'll quote directly from this article. Joe Biden has won support at the G7 summit for a carry-on spending plan as Western leaders rejected austerity, meaning they wanted to reject being too conservative or essentially closing down their wallets. They rejected austerity in a post-COVID world and said, hey, we need to go big. And they decided to tackle inequality at home and abroad. In fact, Mario Draghi, who's Italy's prime minister and former head of the European Central Bank, followed President Biden and declared there is a compelling case for expansionary fiscal policy. What that basically means is we need to spend more and we need to dig ourselves out of this crisis. In fact, Draghi argued that it was time to spend now, even if Western countries had to commit to longer-term fiscal prudence to reassure markets and to ensure central bankers did not take fright and excessively hike interest rates. Opening the summit, and this was very, very important, Boris Johnson from Great Britain said this: it is vital that we don't repeat the mistakes of the last great crisis, the last big economic recession of 2008, when the recovery was not uniform across all parts of society. Johnson also said the recovery should be built with the environment in mind and in a more gender-neutral and more feminine way. Really interesting set of comments there. The G7 countries will be using the summit to commit to higher spending to help the developing world with a clear message that the West offers an alternative to the support offered by Beijing. In fact, what the world leaders decided was to supply 1 billion vaccine doses, half of those coming from the United States, 1 billion vaccine doses to poorer countries, which comes in response to China's vaccine diplomacy. The US has claimed that Beijing offers its medical help with strings attached. So you can start to see more and more support for President Biden's approach is emerging across the world. And here's what's really interesting. President Biden does not want an excessive burden on US tech companies. While Britain is fighting to exclude big banks, the US does not see a conceptual basis for financial services exclusion. This was a comment from a US Treasury official. So you can start to see that more and more support is actually emerging for President Biden's plan internationally as the world leaders met at the G7 summit. Now, I want to know from our viewers and subscribers, and I can tell you based on our statistics that over 90% of the viewers of Ignition Time are based in the United States. Let me know what you think of President Biden's approach and by extension, the fact that many leaders in the G7 are now essentially warming up to this approach of expansionary fiscal policy. Again, that means essentially keeping interest rates low, flooding the system with money, making sure people can spend money, making sure the economy keeps on chugging along, keeps on moving, as opposed to trying to be conservative, which ironically is the Republicans' approach. We're starting to see a significant level of international support for President Biden's expansionary fiscal policies, which, by the way, include a significant $4 trillion stimulus, infrastructure stimulus that is intended to boost spending across the country. And folks, this may not be a stimulus check in the mail, but it is going to be something that creates hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of new jobs, which in and of itself is a significant stimulus. Because at the end of the day, a good stimulus is a good paying job that allows you to live the American dream. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. One thing is for sure, international support is emerging for President Biden as world leaders essentially back President Biden's call for more economic stimulus, and they welcome the US appeal to carry on spending and meet the moment. This is pretty significant, and it also tells us that this entire approach towards stimulus is not just something that is necessary, not just something that allows our fellow Americans to keep the lights on, to make rent, to be able to put food on the table. This is not just something that allows individuals in travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality to pay their bills, but this is something that is getting significant international support. Yes, you heard that right. Significant international support from our allies all over the world, from the G7 countries who want to not only use the summit to commit to higher spending to help the developing world, but also offer a clear message that the West, meaning the G7, can counter the growing influence of China, which they consider to be something that comes with strings attached. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. I want to know whether you agree or disagree with this global support from the G7 for the massive stimulus plans that have been proposed by President Biden, not just the past plans that have passed Congress. I'm talking about the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. I'm also talking about future plans, the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, which at this moment in time looks like it's going to pass only through reconciliation. And that is going to involve the conservative Democrat from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. I do believe that Joe Manchin will come around. I do believe that the Democrat from Arizona, Kristen Sinema, will come around because they'll get a call from President Biden, and President Biden will inevitably have to make some compromise in order to get their vote, which, by the way, is exactly what happened with the American Rescue Plan. Joe Manchin was able to get some things included, including an income threshold, a more restrictive income threshold, the $160,000 income threshold for stimulus checks, which was not a part of the first, second, and third stimulus check, but it was a part of the fourth stimulus check, which was a part of the American Rescue Plan. I do think that a deal will be reached by the Democrats. I don't think that anything the Republicans will do as far as stimulus is concerned is going to meet the high bar that President Biden, and by extension, all the different leaders of the G7 are indeed calling for. Please click the like button. Please subscribe. Please enable notifications. I want you to know we work very hard on this channel to bring you the latest news. We appreciate you. Also follow us on Twitter. Here's our Twitter feed. You'll be able to follow along with all the latest news and all the latest stories in real time. And you'll be able to keep up with these stories and engage with us on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching. We're looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.